go time. Generation Gap Sports, broadcast number 19. Like the golden arm of Johnny Unitas. We're at number 19. That's pretty significant, guys. Tonight, we've got a lot of talk about, a lot of NFL action going on right now leading up to the Super Bowl. But first, let's introduce our wonderful panel here, Baumans. We'll go from oldest to youngest. Guys, first of all, we've got Bob. Got a lot of talk about a lot of NFL action going on right now. Then we've got yours truly, John, followed up by Bobby, Benny, and Nick. Okay, let's get after it. Okay, guys, there's a lot of controversy right now leading up to the Super Bowl. For Chiefs fans, this has got to be like a punch in the gut. A lot of people around the country are increasingly starting to believe that the Chiefs are not for real. In fact, the NFL is working with the government to give the Chiefs a Super Bowl victory, a victory they could not earn on their own. And that Taylor Swift is the agent working closely with Travis Kelce and the rest of the Chiefs and perhaps the refs to make sure that the Chiefs walk away with that title. Benny, Bobby, come on, guys. You guys are loyal, especially Bobby, loyal Chiefs fans. Is this for real? Are the Chiefs for real or are they fake?
I'm not going to dignify that nonsense with a response.
Well, there's been a lot happening, I think, around the world right now. And if you just look, if you do your own research, John, you're going to find out a lot of stuff that they don't want you to know about. So you just got to keep digging around because they're everywhere, man.
I have to say, if this were to be true, it'd be pretty impressive that so many people could be colluding on this in this conspiracy, and nobody else would know. None of these conspiracy figures ever fesses up, which is interesting.
I think the fascinating aspect of this, if you're thinking as a society, even historically for the modern era, I mean, we're seeing, I think, the sort of conspiratorial thoughts now reach every aspect of society. I think sports is probably one of the few places that was left untouched by conspiracy theories at this level, and now it's become mainstream where you have the NFL, the most popular, sports league in America, now has been infiltrated finally, where the conspiracy theories are now regular. And this was even before the Super Bowl. I've been seeing stuff about the Chiefs specifically, especially since Taylor Swift got involved. That elevated the Chiefs' profile to the extent where everyone has an eyeball on them. And now every single person, like every time the Chiefs would win a game, they're like, oh, it was rigged. The Chiefs, Taylor Swift, it's all about making the money. And now obviously you're seeing the government role conspiracy theory that people are coming up with. But yeah, I don't know what's left untouched at this point in terms of the conspiracy theories. It's pretty much covered everything.
Now, Bob, you've been following the NFL for a long time, and you're a man of logic and substance. When you hear about things like this, what goes through your head?
Of course, it seems completely nuts. And I think the first standard of proof is that if you had a conspiracy, as you suggested, if you had a conspiracy large enough, pervasive enough to pull this off, it would inevitably get leaked, because you can't possibly have that many people involved in something and keep it a secret. I mean, the military's long understood that, which is why they narrow things down to the smallest number of people humanly possible when it comes to handling privileged information. Once in a while, a crazy story comes up. A few years after Super Bowl III, which of course the Colts lost to the Jets, famous Colts lineman, Hall of Famer Bubba Smith, floated the suggestion that somehow the fix had been in on the game because there were a couple of inexplicable events in that football game. And yeah, they were inexplicable just because there were a couple of guys who royally screwed up. But it is a very weird scenario that we're in these days. And of course, this is a gift from the internet and increasing human isolation and wandering imaginations and tossing a dash of paranoia and lots of willing people out there to float conspiracy theories to explain almost anything. As a Ravens fan looking at this Super Bowl, my thoughts are pretty simple. This was a winnable game. And there were several ways that they could have lost it, and they chose all three. They had penalties, stupid penalties. They had some turnovers. I would note, additionally, the Chiefs had none. And third, Lamar Jackson had an average game when he needed his A game. The Chiefs didn't turn it over. Mahomes played a really sharp, careful game, not statistically spectacular, but he didn't blow things up. Going way back again to the 1960s, one of the secrets to Vince Lombardi's championship teams with Green Bay was to minimize turnovers. And almost every year when they won the league, they also had the fewest turnovers, or very near the fewest turnovers. And Bart Starr's interception totals in their good years were ridiculously low, and so forth. So that's a major consideration in these outcomes. The simplest explanation is usually the best, and in this case, the Ravens were outplayed by the Chiefs. That's pretty much boils down to it. But it was, I think, a winnable game. Take away any of those three things, and it's very possible it's tied going into and forcing overtime. And then you got a coin flip.
Nick, when you look at Chiefs and the Ravens, obviously had two of the very, very best, most dynamic quarterbacks in the NFL. It seems in these big games, though, it's Mahomes that always comes up big. And Lamar Jackson, things just don't pan out for him. Nick, any thoughts on why that might be?
I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of bummed out too. I like seeing a dynamic quarterback that does things a little differently. Who's by all accounts a great teammate, great leader in the locker room. Kind of bummed to not see him, succeed in the playoffs. And he did play pretty average. I mean, we really wasn't that good. At 7 points. Just bad pick near the end. I don't know. I mean, sometimes it seems like these teams kind of inevitable, almost the way the Patriots were for a while. I think the last two playoff games the Chiefs have had, I guess they've been the receivers of two fumbles to the end zone, which touchbacks like that happen almost never. And here they are getting two in a row in big playoff games. Kind of the way the Patriots, what do you call it when Brady kind of came through with his arm, the tuck rule. I'm not saying these are. It seems like teams like this, they have these coincidences, not conspiratorial, but that just kind of go their way, and they just have so much momentum. I don't know. I think the Chiefs they're just kind of that team.
Yeah, one of those was ours. The one in the Bills game. It was Mecole Hardman who fumbled it through the end zone.
Yeah, you're totally right.
And gave the ball to Buffalo. But yeah, I mean, this is really just the Chiefs' time. You guys, everybody doubted us all year. Don't have a 1,000-yard receiver. Don't have enough returning talent. Blah blah blah. Never a doubt. Kansas City Chiefs back in the Super Bowl 4 times in the last 5 years. Just our time. Sorry, folks. And we're underdogs again. Go figure that. We've got Brock Purdy, the San Francisco 49ers, is a 1.5-point favorite last check against Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Like, you kidding me?
That seems crazy.
That's fine with us. That's just fine with us.
I can't see how you bet against.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that a second. Brock Purdy is a winner. Obviously, Mahomes is known as a big-time player. He's a champion. I think most people would say Mahomes is a playmaker. How about Brock Purdy? Is he a playmaker or is he a game manager?
Well, according to my fantasy football team, I think he was a pretty good player. So put up a lot of points for me.
Solid.
I even replaced Jalen Hurts with Brock Purdy near the probably halfway through the season because Purdy was more consistent for getting points. So I think especially today, if you're not like a really flashy quarterback, Mahomes has all these kooky passes he makes, or Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts can run and make all sorts of plays. I think Brock Purdy is just kind of more of a traditional quarterback, and because of that, people kind of think that maybe he's just a game manager. But I think in many ways, I mean, if you think about, obviously Brock Purdy's not like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or anything like that, but no, those guys are exactly flashy players. They just completed their passes and threw touchdowns. So I think they have better arms probably than Purdy, but Purdy's definitely one of the top quarterbacks in the league.
No question. He's pretty efficient. He's a smart quarterback, and he's pretty quick on his feet when he needs to be. And it could just be that in the 49ers system, maybe some of his talent really is never on display. But you look at the record, the guy can play. Bob, what do you think back to some of the great quarterbacks over the years, or even some of the average quarterbacks? Who does Brock Purdy remind you of?
That's a great question. He strangely enough, he does remind me of a young Tom Brady a little bit. Before Tom Brady became Tom Brady, nobody really realized how good he was. And that was even true for Pat Mahomes. He came out and was almost immediately playing phenomenally well. But until he won a Super Bowl, nobody was quite sure how good he was. And I think there's an additional psychological element here. I think these days, when there's this constant intensive media scrutiny, once you've won your first Super Bowl, a little of the pressure is off, because you've kind of made an indelible mark that will last through football history, regardless of what else happens. So I think the cliche is that it's really hard to win a back-to-back Super Bowls, but I would say your chances are a little better to win that second Super Bowl than they are if you've never won a Super Bowl, just because of the pressure factor. Getting back to the quarterback's question, there could be a little bit of Unitas there to talk about too. Unitas emerged very suddenly in the National Football League from out of no place. He had been an afterthought in the draft by the Steelers, who cut him without even taking a close look at him. And the old story was the Colts managed to sign him for the cost of a 90-cent phone call because he'd been playing semi-pro sandlot football when they actually acquired him. And he very quickly demonstrated his arm and his poise. And he just had a gift for making the right decisions, an innate ability to read defenses, and a good arm. And seems a little bit like Purdy has some of those qualities. Unitas was not going to blow you away as an athlete. I would say on Purdy's behalf, he unlocked several pretty decent runs on Sunday. So people may have been selling him short as an athlete, but he seems to deliver the ball where and when it's needed. So.
We've compared Brock Purdy to Tom Brady and Johnny Unitas. No pressure, kid.
Hey, speaking of pressure, Benny, let's talk about the Jets a second. Bob made a point that once you win your first Super Bowl, the media probably accepts you a little bit more. Maybe there's a little less pressure. However, with Aaron Rodgers going from the Packers to the Jets, and let's say he's healthy next year, I would think that there'd be a fair amount of pressure on Rodgers in the New York media to produce fast, as opposed to say to like a Joe Flacco, who was a very successful quarterback himself, but never attained the heights that the Rodgers has. So, Benny, what's your read on Rodgers and the Jets and the pressure there?
Yeah, I think there's certainly more pressure than when Flacco was at the Jets. Absolutely. I mean, the expectation, I think, would be at least playoffs. I don't know if people really truly think that the Jets are going to win the Super Bowl next year, since the organization's a little dysfunctional and we don't really know what Rodgers we're going to get. He is he is at the point where eventually he's going to not be good anymore. So we just don't know when that's going to be. But it could be any day. So it's one of those things where we're hoping that there should be enough left in the tank. I would hope to make the playoffs, but I don't know how that injury actually impacts him. No one's seen him play since the beginning of last year. So
I would intrude, Ben. I was just reading today that Rodgers did get into practices late in the season, even though he wasn't allowed to play in a game because his leg still wasn't up to it. But they said he was shredding the Jets defense in practices, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean I'm sure that's fine in practice. I don't really. The thing is, let me put it this way: it's easy to shred people at practice, but when you have the Jets' offensive line in a real game, that's another issue. So I don't know how that's going to go, because the Jets, and this has been an issue, and I don't think the Jets have had good drafting when it comes to quarterbacks the past decade. Obviously, it's hard to remember the last time the Jets had a good quarterback. Certainly, they haven't had a great one since probably Namath, but a good one was, like Chad Pennington, for example. But since Chad Pennington, it's been basically a bunch of guys that maybe they had some talent, but none of them worked out. And it certainly did not help that there hasn't been a good offensive line for the Jets now in a long time as well. So it's not shocking as a Jets fan that Rodgers would get hurt. It wouldn't be shocking if he were to get hurt again this upcoming year, because there's been no evidence the Jets are capable of putting together an offensive line that can function well enough to protect a quarterback. So we'll see.
So Nick, you see some of these other Bowmans here tonight are big Chiefs fans. We see what's going on there. I have to say that my heart kind of goes out to the Detroit Lions and what happened with them. Nick, you're a business analytics guy, which means you're strong in the numbers and likelihood of various outcomes. A couple times during that game, the Lions were up 3 scores. Also, on a couple occasions, they were up 2 scores. Could have gone up 3 scores by kicking field goals. But the book says in those situations, you don't kick the field goal, which is almost automatic. You try to get the 7 points. But it looks like in this particular game, giving up that 3-score lead on 2 occasions really came back to bite the Lions. What's your read, Nick?
Glad you asked me this. I was hearing some numbers kind of about this exact question that I think are interesting. So I think on like 4th and 3 and less, I might be on about 4th and 3, average in the NFL for conversions, something like 52%. For the Lions this year, it was 70%. So they've demonstrated, as a team that goes forward and fourth down, super aggressive, that they are much better than the average NFL team at converting that. So it's kind of a different math for them. And it's also the strategy they've been going with the whole year. So if, they had suddenly, in this game, just, abandoned their strategy that had gotten them to the NFC Championship game and up 3 scores, I don't know. I mean, maybe they would have won the game. But I don't know if that's the kind of message you want to send your team. So was it a bad call, to kind of go forward on those kind of 2 pivotal 4th downs? Maybe. But it's also, there was kind of keeping a lot with the strategy. I think running on 3rd down at the end of the game, when it was 3rd and goal, I think that was an actual bad decision. Because at that point, they had to burn a timeout, and they had to rely on onside kick to get the ball back.
It is just kind of a tricky call. You raise a good point, because there's sort of a standard NFL book on what you're supposed to do in given situations. But a lot of it depends on who you're playing and who you are yourselves. What works for you. I'll just, go jump to college football real quick. Wisconsin playing Iowa. With Wisconsin, went after 7 points versus 3 points. When you're playing the Iowa Hawkeyes, 3 points is huge. It could be enough to win the game because their offense was so bad. But the fact the Badgers couldn't convert on some of those 4th downs probably cost them the football game. But the book says go for 7. So it's in the book isn't perfect. It's just interesting in games like, the Lions 49ers, where so many of us were hoping the Lions could make it all the way. That would have been so cool. That there's just a couple things out there that maybe seem controversial, But if you look at what made the Lions, and made them so tough to beat this year, and how they're all bought in with the coaching staff, maybe always going for it is, part of that mental makeup that makes them so strong. What do you think, Bobby?
Yeah, I mean, I think you really got to take game flow into account. I mean, when they went for it on that last one, they were down 2 scores, and you don't make it, it becomes that much harder to rally. So it seemed like a little bit they were just almost blindly sticking to their process of this is what we do. When sometimes you really got to take momentum into account, where if you don't score there, then what? Yeah, it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback and dispute that, but I was a little uneasy when they made that decision. So, but yeah, varies for every team. We'll see if they continue that philosophy going forward.
Bobby, what's the spread in the Super Bowl right now?
-1.5 to the Niners is the last I saw.
So if we go around the horn
It's
here,
hilarious to me.
Did say it's 49ers are 1.5-point favorites. Around the horn, Ben. I'll start with you, Bobby. What's your
Oh,
what's your
it's
call
gone
in the
up to
game?
2. It's gone
It's
up
up
to
to
2
2?
points. Unbelievable.
What do you think is going to happen?
No respect. What?
What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I mean, I think Chiefs are going to win outright. I'm pretty confident in that. We're just fine playing the underdog role. I have no issue. They can, raise it to whatever point differential they want. We're the best underdog team ever. We've been underdogs every step of the way, which is insane considering we're defending champions and this is our 4th Super Bowl in 5 years, and we have Mahomes. But hey, make us underdogs. That's great.
Benny, what do you got for a favorite there?
So, yeah, I mean, this is an interesting question for me. I want the Chiefs to win, of course. Hometown team there. Go Kansas City. I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl, though. I actually think the 49ers will win. And the reason being is, as I've kind of said before, I think if the Chiefs had a real wide receiver that was like a true number 1 receiver, I think that they would definitely win. But I do think that, the 49ers probably watching this, the game plan is, okay, if you could stop Travis Kelce, then basically the Chiefs are going to have to rely on other guys that are not really a star. And that gets hard to do when you're game after game after game. I mean, the Chiefs did not have the regular season, record of the Chiefs was not exactly stellar, compared to past years. And I think it's because of the receiving situation. So I think that the Chiefs will still can win the game, but the 49ers are another animal from the teams the Chiefs have played so far in the playoffs. I mean, the Ravens are a good team, but Lamar Jackson's never really proven himself. The 49ers are loaded, though. They have probably the best running back in the league. They have one of the best tight ends in the league as well. After Kelce, obviously Kelce I'd say is the best, but and they just have good receivers. They have a great quarterback. They have a good defense. I mean, the 49ers are pretty loaded for a team. So if there's anyone that's going to give the Chiefs a hard time, I think it's the 49ers. And that's been my thought before the playoffs started. Because, I mean, the team is just stacked. So it'll be a good game, but I think the 49ers will probably pull this one out. But I hope the Chiefs win.
Bob, 49ers versus Chiefs. What's your call?
This is pretty close to a toss-up as far as I'm concerned. And there are sort of 2 ways to look at this. I do think when you take into account injuries and the talent and star power up and down each roster, the 49ers appear to have a slight edge, which is the reason I think that they're doing well with the bookmakers. But the one sticking point is you got Pat Mahomes on one side and Brock Purdy, who's never been to a Super Bowl, on the other side. It's Pat Mahomes does not come up with a mediocre game very often. He did when they lost to Tampa in the Super Bowl a few years ago, but that's practically like Haley's Comet, waiting for that to happen. So I kind of have to favor the Chiefs, but I won't be surprised at anything that happens in this game. I do think the the Ravens game and the Buffalo game may have exposed a couple things with regard to the Chiefs that the 49ers might try to tackle. The Ravens, again, squandered their opportunities. I think we can count on the Chiefs to play their regular game, and that's probably good enough, but we'll see.
Nick, what's the call from the heartland, the city of Chicago? 49ers versus Chiefs.
It's funny. I think the 49ers roster wise just loaded. And they got and to the contrary, the offensively at least, the Chiefs seem like, I mean, they got like Rashee Rice, who's all right, pretty good. They got Kelsey, but it seems like otherwise they're kind of devoid of the skill positions. But when you watch them play, they just make it work. Pat Mahomes I think he's 9-1, is an underdog now. And I also, it's something about this Niners team, especially watching them, against the Packers, who I thought they got outplayed by, and then the Lions, who they were severely outplayed by for more than half that game. I don't know if they're that good. I think they're really skilled, really talented, but I don't know if they're like a dominant team. The Chiefs I find it so hard to bet against a team like that. I think they're the in a big game like this, I think they're gonna look like the better team. Like they are the better team.
Nick, I'm with you. I think the Chiefs are hot, and I'm not talking about Taylor Swift either. I'm just saying that football team right now is playing well. Mahomes is playing well. I've got to watch the 49ers 3 times this season, twice against the Packers and of course against the Lions. I wasn't that impressed. I really wasn't. I think the Ravens are a better team than the 49ers. 49ers have a lot of really good players, and they're well coached, but they're not overwhelming. And I think the Chiefs, they're a hot team that's been there before. They got a lot of momentum going. I like Mahomes and the Chiefs. I think that the Chiefs are to me, should win that game by 7 to 10 points. We'll see where it comes out.
Yeah, I mean, you got Pacheco, who's leading the playoffs in rushing right now. Okay. We have 2 of the top 4 receivers in receiving yards in the playoffs right now. Obviously, Mahomes always does his thing. The Chiefs in the playoffs are a different animal. So, just saying.
Chiefs
I
are
mean,
more
contrary
polished.
to, go ahead. I was saying the contrary of the Ravens. The
Yeah.
Chiefs have seen that has been there. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the Chiefs are the more polished team. I think the 49ers have more talent, but yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think it all depends on that Kelsey Mahomes connection. Because if Kelsey doesn't have a big game, I don't think the Chiefs are going to win. If he's not putting out 100 yards, but we'll see.
All right. Let's switch away from the NFL here for a moment.
John, let me just.
go.
I was just going to throw out one
Yeah.
trivia question before
Sure.
we. Sorry, I accidentally had to clear my throat. One trivia question before we move on, because this struck me as so odd. But I read this a few days ago. Guess which college football team had alumni and alumnus on all of the Final Four in the NFL?
Is it Rutgers?
No. Reasonable guess.
Wisconsin.
No, I won't draw this out. It's Harvard.
Harvard did.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
These guys kickers or snappers or what?
Now you got Kyle Juszczyk, who's the fullback on the 49ers and is like all pro most years. Admittedly, the other 3 guys are not household names. Even I can't remember who they are. But they're fringe players. But it's an interesting stat nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, good for those guys. Obviously, they're very, very talented people. If you graduate from Harvard, you can still play in the NFL.
Well, they did something right.
Yeah,
and of course, Kyle Juszczyk's wife has now got a deal designing jackets for Taylor Swift. She's the one who has suddenly emerged as a fashion designer based on what's happened in the last 2 weeks.
Okay, so some of those interesting outfits that Taylor's wearing, that's
Exactly.
where they're coming from.
Yeah,
That's where they're coming from. Jesus, there's got to be a conspiracy here somewhere. But
So I was like, how does that work? That if 49ers are playing the Chiefs, you're designing clothes, outfits for Taylor Swift to wear at the Chiefs game against your husband's team. Something's going on.
Yeah. What's the story though? That's right.
Right.
yeah.
We'll be against her husband's team this week. Yeah.
More ammunition for the conspiracy theorists out there.
Yeah.
Well, could swing the election in the fall. You never know.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's go to the just interesting things you guys are seeing in the sports world. Bob, let's go back to you. What's going on?
Well, I took a look in the last week at some of the developments in international soccer. The Asia Cup and the Africa Cup are going on right now. And the big trend is that teams that heretofore have not made much of a splash are starting to emerge as factors and may be present at the next World Cup. The group leaders in the Asia Cup are Qatar, Australia, Iran, Iraq, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. Several of those are fairly new, but another one that's right on the cusp is Uzbekistan, which I know has been working furiously to upgrade their program in the last 5 years. So we'll see. Even more dramatic is the turnover in Africa. All 8 of the quarterfinalists in the last Africa Cup did not qualify for the quarters this time. That's unprecedented turnover, 100%. And so among the countries that are moving on and have a chance to go all the way is Cape Verde, of all places, which has done really, really well so far. And you've also got countries, South Africa, Congo, Ivory Coast. And it'll be interesting. Mali, a number of surprises there. One other thing, I suppose this revisits a topic that we talked about way back early last spring, was the Orioles have new ownership. And we were talking a lot about the impact of money, back in about April. And the Orioles, the 2023 version of the Orioles showed that without spending a lot of money, you could have a remarkable season. But in the end, it was a couple of big payroll teams that were playing for the final chips on the table. The Orioles now may be positioned to be among the major spenders. The head of the new ownership group, David Rubenstein, is a major equity partner, and he's worth, they say, $4 to $5 billion. And he's got a group that includes other billionaires, as well as a few folks who are there for cosmetic and cultural reasons, like Cal Ripken and whatnot. So when this is fully transacted, this could have a major impact on the Orioles' ability to do things mid-season or later that could improve their odds.
So these billionaires,
because they currently own the most ridiculous talent pool.
Okay, so these billionaires who Bob who bought the Orioles, are they doing this? Is this a business centered venture? Or are these guys true Orioles fans? Where do these guys coming from?
This guy's Rubenstein is from Baltimore, and he's a fan, and he's supposedly very passionate about the things he chooses to do. So all the early signs are pretty positive that he would be able to take, maybe he's not going to do something crazy like what the Dodgers do, which defies reason as far as I'm concerned. But I can see that this is somebody who is likely to take a big move, make a big move or two at such point when it looks like this is when the Orioles need the extra leverage. So,
all right, go Birds. All right, let's get younger again. Nick, what are you seeing out there?
So that's my stuff.
Good day with sports having a group of billionaires by your team. But did we talk about Doc Rivers last week?
No.
I'll touch on that real quick. Summary for those unaware. A week ago, Bucks Milwaukee Bucks fired their coach Adrian Griffin pretty much right away. Slid in Doc Rivers, um, famous, infamous, however you want to look at it, NBA coach. I think he has the most 3-1 playoff lead losses any coach. Did lead the Celtics to a 2008 victory, but since then has been largely disappointing with some talented squads. Kind of interesting the way it happened. I know the Bucks lead assistant was fired right before the season began by Griffin, and then the Bucks front office is hoping to slide in Rivers as kind of a veteran assistant. And Griffin would not have that, so they're like, all right, we'll make him a free consultant. And then I guess they'd seen enough, and they fired Griffin. Rivers is now the coach. So we'll see what happens.
Why do you think they hired Griffin and not Doc Rivers in the first place?
Well, I think the real mistake was here's my take. They should have hired Nick Nurse and probably would have liked to from Toronto. Adrian Griffin was an assistant under Nurse. I guess Giannis, for whatever reason, didn't want him as a coach. They went with Griffin. I don't think Doc would have been a popular choice at that time. I don't think they would have wanted to hire Doc Rivers. I think they probably have Doc now because, he's available and he's probably, for a coach to be slid in midseason, he's a guy with a lot of years under his belt who's played or worked with some really good players who can kind of manage that situation better than a fresher coach might be able to. I don't think they would have wanted to hire Doc to start the season.
Interesting, because I was a little surprised when they hired Griffin, just because they didn't seem to have the pedigree walking in the door that maybe some other coaches might have.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't know, Giannis, like a lot of star athletes, he's probably in the background. He's pretty influential, so it's hard to say what he may have been looking for. But I think if you look at the Bucks players now, the current squad, they realize, even though their record was very good and they were in second place in their division, that they were not going to win it all the way they were playing. Their defense was just not up to snuff in order to play well and go win a title in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, if you point out, I guess they're fraudulent teams. And it's funny, I don't think the Bucks were a fraudulent team. Everybody knew they weren't their record, including them. So they made the switch.
I don't understand, why they fired Budenholzer way back when in the first place. He won a championship with the Bucks, first Bucks championship for forever. So it's like you get rid of him, and now you're having the merry-go-round with coaches, and Doc Rivers, who's like the go-to guy to bring in for a team that has lots of talent, but tends to underperform. So, I think he's been kind of coasting in the NBA off of the 2008 Celtics team, and he was a good coach that year, but he's been bouncing around a lot over the past decade, and that has a lot to do with it. So I like Doc Rivers a lot, but it's funny that he just keeps popping up on teams.
You look at some of the great Bucks teams from years ago, they actually had pretty well-known, respected coaches. Guys like Don Nelson and a couple of other guys, were pretty well respected. They were pretty big names. Doc Rivers is a big name, but he's a Milwaukee favorite. He went to Marquette. He had a great career at Marquette. He's a big supporter of Marquette basketball, so he gets back to Milwaukee. So for a lot of reasons, I think people in Wisconsin, especially around the Milwaukee area, look at this as sort of hey, this is a former star coming home. And it makes sense from a timing standpoint. He's going to have the players around him that, if he's as good a coach as they hope he has been and will be, with the collection of talent that the Bucks have, that the Bucks can make a lot of noise and win it all. The Bucks made the trades in the offseason so they can win it all for Giannis. They know when Giannis is gone that that team is really going to probably go bust. So they got to win, and they've got to win now. And Doc Rivers gives them that chance. I hope they're right.
Kind of funny side note, Doc had his Marquette jersey retired last week.
Oh,
Funny
really?
Oh yeah.
Interesting timing on
I
that.
don't know what kind of deal they cut there, but I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Sure, from a recruiting standpoint, Marquette's pretty excited about this, so good for them.
I
All
got a
right, Benny,
question
what
for
are
the
you seeing out
NBA,
there?
for the NBA people. So we've had this recent trend of guys going nuts and scoring like 60, 50 points. Doncic had a 73-point game recently. It almost seems like it's become cool, like the cool thing to do for everybody to try to get their 60 or 70-point game. Seems to me like there's zero defense being played in the NBA right now. I mean, when Luka had his 73-point game, they won like 148 to 140. I mean, like this can't be good for the league, right? I mean, it's almost become laughable and unwatchable. It's just no defense at all.
Bobby, you think is it no defense, or is it the way that they're calling the games, or is it the rules? I mean, I think it's pretty lame that teams score like that, because it basically means that it's just kind of a run back and forth down the court until the last couple of minutes, everybody starts to D up and make it more difficult.
I think there's some. I actually have a little bit of a theory about that too, to a certain extent. You know, the NBA, like many sort of organizations at this point that have become super popular, have become globalized. It's a globalized entity now, and you know, appealing to people is no longer. It's no longer just about appealing to the American audience, but there's the European audience, the big audience in China, and it's kind of like, to me, kind of what you see with like superhero movies, how like 20 years ago they just went ballistic with making superhero movies all the time, and it's just kind of this plotless, okay, you know, superhero kills bad guy thing. You know, I think the sort of the purity of what maybe Americans envision traditional basketball being is not in the heads of people that haven't been interested in basketball culturally for more than a decade or so. And so it's like, okay, what do people like? What gets people excited around the world? Points. Let's just keep adding on the points and make the scoring totals ridiculous. Because people don't care. They just want to see action, just like they want to see the same superhero movie over and over again. Lots of action. I think that's just where we're at right now, where sort of as Americans, when we think about basketball and how the game has been played traditionally, it's a globalized game now. People don't think about that. So now it's just about point totals. Now, the funny thing about the high number point totals is still that no one's been come close to getting Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point total in a game. So we'll see if anyone's ever able to break that, despite the inflation of points today in the NBA.
And I kind of going back on the defense point, I have a hard time believing that. I think players in the NBA play great defense. It is such a competitive league. In front offices, they like guys who can play defense. That is valuable. I think there's just so much offensive talent. You know, I talk about the refs kind of maybe influencing an upward point total. I don't know. That's definitely possible, but I think they're playing defense.
What do you think it does for team chemistry when you've got some guys who are scoring points like that? Are they all like all in, like, hey, that's okay, that's cool as long as we win? Or is there a little bit of animosity on a roster when guys scoring all those points all the time?
There's a funny story from the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think this is the night that Joel Embiid had 70. I think some of his teammates they're kind of rallying around their teammate Karl Anthony Towns. I think he had like 50 something at that point. And maybe to a negative point. They rallied around him so much they kind of forced him the ball. They wound up losing the game. So they're forcing the ball too much. He was actually benched later in that game by his coach because he was like, "What the hell are we doing?" He had a funny post-game presser, basically just ripping his players for trying to get their teammate to score, you know, more than 70 on the night where they lost.
You know, it's kind of funny, some of these situations. I go back to 2014, when Frank Kaminsky was just emerging as a decent player. He basically spent his first 2 years on the bench. In year 3, in one of their early games, He had scored 42 points before coming to the bench. And then someone alerted the coaching staff that the school record was 43. If you got another bucket, it'd be 44. And Frank went out there and, he hit a jumper, got his 44, and everybody kind of chuckled and was happy about it. What made that one interesting is nobody thought he was that good, probably including Frank at that point. No one had realized that, hey, he's not just a guy, a novelty act having a big game. This guy's really a stud. It was just totally under the radar as to how good he could become, and eventually did become. So it's always kind of interesting how the team chemistry works. I guess if you have too many scoring stars on a team that thrive on the attention, and one guy's, getting I'll say the mother load of the points, I can see there might be a problem. But I have not heard of any problems in any of these rosters so far. So I guess that's good news. To Benny's point, I don't see anybody scoring 100 points unless everybody on a given team, like on a given night, just wants to load somebody up to take a run at it. Okay. So Benny, what else do you see going on in the sports world?
So thinking back about the world of soccer, there's been kind of some interesting things going on. Obviously, the MLS Soccer League is to be kicking off here soon. But in the meantime, Inter Miami is starting to play preseason games around the world as they've become now this international brand, solely thanks to Messi being on the team, where, now they're doing world tours. It's pretty remarkable. The first time you'll ever see an MLS team doing a world tour. But they also added recently this offseason, they loaded up on some more talent by bringing another old friend of Messi's from the old Barcelona days, Luis Suarez, over, who's going to be one of the greatest strikers of all time. So the team continues to be pretty rich and historically great players that are still pretty good. Recently, they did play a preseason game in Saudi Arabia against one of the Saudi Pro League's top teams. In fact, Al Hilal, who is the Saudi Pro League's defending champion and top team currently. They're undefeated this year in the Saudi Pro League. They lost 4-3, but they only lost after Messi and Suarez were taken off the field, and then Al Hilal got a last minute goal. You have to put this in perspective, since this is mid-season for Al Hilal, who again is undefeated, and preseason for the MLS Inter Miami team. But still interesting to see. They're going to play Cristiano Ronaldo's team, Al Nassr, tomorrow, but Cristiano Ronaldo unfortunately is hurt. So the idea of having Messi and Ronaldo play against each other one last time won't be happening, to, I'm sure, many fans' disappointments. But interesting just to see sort of the profile of MLS grow and Inter Miami thanks to Messi.
Okay. Good stuff. All right. It's a little tidbit here. I know there's because of I'll say that the Kansas Bauman's, there's a disproportionate amount of interest in the Kansas City Chiefs. But for us, with Wisconsin Bauman's, there's some cool stuff going on too more recently. A big basketball game going on Sunday. Number 2, Purdue versus number 6, Wisconsin in the Kohl Center. Purdue is expected to be up there towards the top. Wisconsin, not so much. But Wisconsin is a high-scoring, high-flying team that seems that they get a little bit of destiny coming here. So I'll be there, the Kohl Center. It'll be steamy hot when it comes to the fans in there. It's going to be a very, very exciting game, and it's great to see really some exciting things happening here in Madison. Secondly, with the Packers, Jordan Love. Here's a story. This guy may have been the hottest quarterback in the NFL over the last 6 games of the season. For the most part this year, I think fans were a little uneasy with him. They weren't at all convinced that he was the guy. In fact, there were some fans who maybe thought maybe, he had been a mistake as a draft choice, or maybe someone up, gonna come off the bench like Sean Clifford and replace him. But Jordan Love came up big, and towards the end of the season, not only was Jordan Love hot, but the Packers were hot. And the Packers have the youngest roster in the NFL. So look out, Chiefs, because here come the Packers, and it would be great. It would be absolutely wonderful to relive Super Bowl number 1. It was, right? The original Super Bowl was the Chiefs and the Packers. It'd be fun to get back to that because you have two teams that have very interesting, athletic, talented quarterbacks and fun rosters to watch play. All right. Any other additions for tonight?
We're a little over halfway through the National Hockey League season right now. Some of our picks have emerged to be, contenders. Some have not. Top 4 teams in the league right now. You got the Vancouver Canucks, which has been a bit of a surprise. Boston Bruins, Colorado Avalanche, Florida Panthers. 2 of the 3 worst teams, though, are teams that those among us chose to win the Stanley Cup. So we have the Anaheim Ducks are in third to last, and Chicago Blackhawks in dead last right now. So not looking great.
I just think that the Ducks are I think what we really need is we need Gordon Bombay to come out of retirement and take over for the team. And I think then we'll start flying together and maybe get a couple of knuckle pucks going. And I think we'll make a good comeback this year. Obviously, disappointing start.
Good.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder that my Blackhawks are in last place. That just makes my day.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
All right. Okay, guys, we're about the top of the hour. Been a good broadcast. Hopefully, we'll be back with everybody real soon. Until then, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back to you soon in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everybody.